Trump is purposely manipulating the markets so that him, his family, and his allies can make off like bandits right before they lead us into a situation that could potentially end the world as we know it. It's truly disgusting. Once again, the fact that he hasn't been impeached, or better yet, the fact that the Democrats haven't moved to impeach him and made this a key issue is disgusting. And it's exactly why the U.S. has to wake up and realize this duopoly is not the solution. Voting for one party or the other is not going to solve these problems.
All right. So I've been digging into this fascinating and honestly terrifying interview between George Galloway and Niko House, and it lays out exactly how the entire political machine operates behind closed doors. They're talking about how the establishment doesn't just manage policy anymore, they manage distractions. Niko drops this massive bombshell about what happened with the ICE deployments in Minnesota, linking it directly to this right-wing YouTuber, Nick Shirley, who he alleges acted like a propaganda arm for the administration to manufacture a panic over immigrant daycare fraud. And when you look at it, it's all a shell game to keep our eyes off the real money moves, like how billions of our tax dollars are funding $70,000 per capita lifestyles overseas with free healthcare and free college, while working class Americans are completely drowning in medical bills and predatory student debt. It's a complete Uniparty betrayal, and both sides are bleeding us dry. You are listening to Floor Leader Insider, so make sure to hit subscribe right now before we dive into the deep end of this footage. Let's get into it.
Can we talk about the President of the United States, who says he's Elvis, and who says he's George Washington, and who I'm not sure which of the two actually to compare him with. I'm thinking of Elvis as he died on the toilet seat. I've got this in my mind suddenly. What can we say about Donald Trump? 50, I'm told it's 54 in fact, 54 tweets in the middle of the night displaying an unhinged array of fantasy and fever. It's a kind of fever he's got, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if he actually realizes the irony of him trying to compare himself to George Washington as a draft dodger. Because the reason George Washington ended up in the position that he's in was because of all he had done for the U.S. military during the American Revolutionary War. But yeah, I was listening to the part where you were talking about him supposedly not using substances. But you were absolutely right. Going on a tweet rampage in the middle of the night out of absolutely nowhere makes me feel like he was engaging in some of that. Maybe he was going on the slopes of Bolivian snow powder. Like, it's not normal. It's not normal behavior. And the fact that there is still a huge portion of his base that believes that this behavior is typical, not just for a president, but for any leader in a position to either start or stop World War II or World War III, is absolutely ludicrous. I'm saddened and terrified at how far our standards have fallen as a society. The fact that this man has not been impeached merely for his mental deficiencies.
Exactly, but he's got a cabinet who would have to trigger the 25th Amendment, and instead of trying to rein him in, they unleash him, they feed him. I saw the press conference in the cabinet room the other day. They were setting up the ball for him to try and dunk. I see one of his tweets last night. He's transformed himself into some kind of basketball superstar, dunking someone. He's not helped by the people he's picked to be around him. They're harming him.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that I've actually maintained about this administration as compared to the last administration is that this administration might be full of neocons, but the difference is they are purely clout chasers, which is dangerous because they are more concerned with the position than the power and influence that's supposed to come with the position. They're completely and totally unconcerned with the fact that even if they were to advise Trump to not engage with war with Iran, for example, or in the case of Tulsi before she left, not go to war with Iran, not engage with Venezuela, they know that they're going to be completely and utterly ignored and then potentially trashed by Trump himself, just for trying to advise him on how to go forward with conflicts that have huge economic, global impacts economically, militarily, etc. They're all clout chasers. And so when you have a bunch of yes men in your administration and you are simultaneously mentally unstable, that is very problematic. And we really are witnessing what it looks like when power players don't actually care about how much power or influence they have. All they care about is the fact that they have the title and that they get pretty little placards and they're going to be able to retire one day and their picture will be hung up in the White House for a position they actually had no influence over while they held it.
Well, of course, some of them are making very big money. A long time ago, 36 years ago, I wrote a book about the downfall of the Ceausescus. Now, Ceausescu turned bad, but his children were even worse, particularly one of them, who was basically on a corrupt rampage, looting the country. The Trump family are far worse than the Ceausescus, far, far worse. I mean, even the schoolboy, Barron, is insider trading. The others, the older kids, well, they're not serving as U.S. envoys in World War III trigger points, are making hay while the sun shines. They're buying startups, which then are immediately given Pentagon contracts worth billions. And their stock appreciation has become phenomenal. I mean, they make Nancy Pelosi look like a small-time player.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and you got to add the fact that Donald Trump Jr. is about to marry the daughter of Epstein's banker in Palm Beach. Like, they're legitimately robbing not just the country, but you could argue the world in broad daylight. And there's even more evidence of that when you just go back and look at this pattern of behavior regarding Trump's rhetoric and this ceasefire, this deal that they're supposed to be making with Iran. Every time the war is ramping up and it looks like Iran is about to finish off the United States and Israel, Trump pretends like there's a ceasefire in play. And, gas is up and everything is up. And then he says, well, we're working on a ceasefire deal. The markets begin to be manipulated. All of a sudden, our stock markets begin to hit record numbers and nobody knows why, because technically speaking, the market should be volatile and should be dropping because of supply chain issues. There's no guarantee this war is over. The ceasefire hasn't been signed, but Trump is purposely manipulating the markets so that him, his family, and his allies can make off like bandits right before they lead us into a situation that could potentially end the world as we know it. It's truly disgusting. Once again, the fact that he hasn't been impeached, or better yet, the fact that the Democrats haven't moved to impeach him and made this a key issue is disgusting. And it's exactly why the U.S. has to wake up and realize this duopoly is not the solution. Voting for one party or the other is not going to solve these problems, because if Trump can be the most unpopular president in history and you still can't find an excuse to get him out, to get out and campaign, to risk your career to get him out, then there is no democracy in the U.S. and this is about time they stop pretending it is one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they called the one party two parties. And the truth is, the reason the Democrats can't go for the jugular is because they're guilty of exactly the same things. Hunter Biden was doing exactly what Donald Trump Jr. is doing, just not nearly so well. He was hampered, of course, by his addictions to very young girls and substances. but the Democrats are guilty of exactly the same things. And the only difference between them and the Republicans is that they would tie rainbow ribbons to the bombers.
Yeah, that's about the only difference. I don't know if, of course, you're following the Thomas Massie election, I'm sure. But what was interesting to me was just the behavior and reactions or lack thereof surrounding the Massie election. Whenever it became clear that the Israeli lobby was breaking records to get Massie out, the only congressman, in conjunction with Ro Khanna, but that's a different conversation. I don't believe that Ro Khanna would have ever had the courage to release the Epstein files and fight for that by himself. He's just never shown that. Massie, however, has consistently shown courage on issues of both Epstein and specifically Israel. And I was waiting for one of these progressive Democrats, one of these progressive legislators like AOC to come out and call out what the Israeli lobby was doing to Massie, to see if for once we can at least act as if we have control of our democracy in another country attempting to exert control over the voters' will should not be tolerated. I just wanted to see if it was going to happen once. George, not one Democrat came out and called out the way Massie was removed from office, because it was specifically because of Epstein files in Israel. Once again, this is a slam dunk. Ro Khanna came out after and was like, yeah, he was taken out because of the Epstein situation. Well, why didn't you go there and campaign for him? Why didn't you put your career on the line? Why didn't you say this beforehand? Because you knew he was taken out because of the Epstein files, because you were part of it. But what's more interesting to me is the Democrats didn't go after Ro Khanna the same way they went after Thomas Massie, because at the end of the day, Ro Khanna will play ball. They've realized now Thomas Massie will not. And instead of standing beside him and saying we will not let our country be conquered by another government whose bills we're paying, they were all quiet. That says everything you need to know about the Uniparty in the United States.
Everything. I mean, I don't know if you saw Netanyahu boasting this week that the GDP in Israel is now 70,000 US dollars per capita. So per Israeli, the wealth is 70,000 US dollars. You know communities and whole states and whole cities where they can only dream of the life that is being lived by Israelis on American dime. They've got a free health service. They have free student education, no student loans in Israel, and $70,000 a year mean what? How can Americans tolerate their money going to a foreign country which is forever giving them headaches, dragging them into wars, forcing people all over the world to hate them, and it's living high on the hog? Go figure, as the Americans say.
George, that's a question I legitimately ask myself every single day, because I see people arguing on social media with so much fervor saying, we can't cancel student debt. I'm not going to pay that bill, even though it would help out the majority of working class Americans and ultimately benefit our economy. Okay, so you're okay with paying the bills of Israelis? And it's usually the people who support Israel, Zionists, that are the most adamant that they cannot possibly think of even canceling student debt, can't possibly consider giving Americans free health care, even though it's not free. We are paying for it with our taxes already. We pay more than any other country in the world, and yet we still have medical bills stacked miles high. They can't consider helping their own people, their own countrymen, but they have absolutely nothing to say about how our tax dollars are giving lifestyles to Israelis that Americans could only dream of. Because even still, if we were able to, per capita, per Israeli, have $70,000 per American, it wouldn't even matter all that much, George. You know why? Because at the end of the day, we still have to pay healthcare bills, and you're always a hospital stay away from almost going bankrupt. You still have to pay for child care, and you're just one unplanned child away from being broke that week. Your car payment is probably still way too high. Gas still way too high. Energy bills are going up. 70,000 per American is basically almost the equivalent of maybe 30 to 40,000. And if you know any better, trying to support a family on that type of income is increasingly difficult. The outrage, the lack thereof rather, when it comes to Israel receiving all the benefits that we should be entitled to because we're paying for our benefits. We're just not receiving any of it, but we're paying for their benefits and they're receiving more than we could possibly imagine.
You lapsed into Portuguese there, just as I was about to turn you in the direction, as it happens, of the Latin American theater. I have, as I think you know, a very long association with Cuba, and it's now a part of the daily rhetoric, particularly of Rubio and Lindsey Graham, but also of Trump himself, that they intend, if necessary, to invade the island of Cuba, which is in a way where I came in, albeit at the age of 6. But I recall the Cuban Missile Crisis very vividly, actually, because my parents spoke of little else in the house. We thought the world was going to end. Do you think the U.S. is really going to try and invade Cuba? And what will the attitude be of the American people to that?
They will absolutely try to invade Cuba. And I'll tell you how I know. I don't know if you recall, but right before this situation in Minnesota happened around January, in December, Nick Shirley went there specifically to do propaganda on behalf of the Trump administration for Trump to justify sending ICE agents and all that stuff into Minnesota. And ultimately, not until recently were they even able to charge anybody. But a lot of the charges that we're seeing were actually started by the Biden administration, and they're being finalized now. But there was zero justification for what we saw about, because like it's Minnesota, for Christ's sakes. Like there's nothing world changing about arresting Somalis in Minnesota. It was just a random distraction that Trump used to show that he was tough on immigration and he's going to not going to tolerate fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Nick Shirley shows up, gives him the reason that he needs, then he sends the troops. Nick Shirley goes to Cuba around the same time activists go to Cuba to send aid. He makes a huge deal that saying that he's being followed by the government, that the communists are after him, that the people of Cuba hate communism and would welcome if the U.S. Went there to invade. And all of a sudden, an aircraft carrier ends up in the Caribbean right beside Cuba. It's a pattern that we're seeing. Clearly, Nick Shirley is a Fed. He's basically admitted to getting his talking points and taking his orders from the Trump administration. And so if everything that we know holds true and consistent, the U.S. will definitely try to invade Cuba, if not for any other reason, to save face, because they need to still prove that they can have some whole control over their region of the world if they can't maintain control over the region that Iran is about to be in control of, because the U.S. can't beat them. So it's just, and that's Trump's ego, right? If he can't win in Iran, he's going to try to take over a country that that doesn't necessarily have the ability to fight back by itself. So I think that within the next maybe next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll be invading Cuba. At the end of the day, one thing this administration has shown, whatever the worst possible decision that can be made in that moment, that's exactly what Trump will do. And I think that we have to stop underestimating how delusional he's become and how aggressive he's become in trying to prove that he's strong and that the country can only be successful if Trump is exercising his ability to use U.S. military to control foreign policy and the international economy.
Now, when you look at the big picture, what Galloway and Niko House are really showing us here is that the system isn't just broken, It's working exactly how they designed it to. I mean, look at what just happened to Thomas Massie getting completely wiped out in his 2026 primary. The second, a congressman tries to push for the release of the Epstein files and challenges foreign lobby money, the machine drops $32 million to delete his career. And the craziest part is, the so-called progressives in Congress just sat back, stayed completely quiet, and let it happen, because they all play for the same team at the end of the day. They want us fighting over random border stunts and manufactured distractions so we don't notice their families making off like bandits on insider trading and Pentagon contracts. If we keep letting them run this playbook without calling it out, there is no real democracy left to save. But hey, I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. Did Niko hit the nail on the head with the Minnesota and Cuba connection, or is the reality even worse? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.